Welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I'm John Kim.
And I'm Noelle Cordeaux. We are the founders of Lumia.
And we're super passionate about all things coaching, and we want to share what we've learned from over a decade of coaching and training thousands of life coaches.
Let's dive into the science and magic of coaching.
Today's episode, Empathetic Feedback, putting coaching skills to work in your relationship. Noelle, this is a little bit of me and a little bit of you. Me with the relationship stuff and you with the empathetic feedback.
It is. It is both of us. And, I think, speaking of entrepreneurship, one of the things that ends up happening is that whenever you build something as an entrepreneur, it ends up being a reflection of you and your business partner.
Yeah, for sure. I've never heard the term empathetic feedback before, so I'm really excited to dive into this.
Well, I made it up.
Oh, that's why. You made it up. Okay.
I made it up. I think anything can be categorically empathetic, right? Whether you're giving feedback or you're having a conversation with somebody, anything that involves other humans has the capacity to have an empathetic lens put on it. And
what would an empathetic lunch look like?
An empathetic lunch?
Yes.
God, just a lot of care in terms of how you're experiencing your hot dog.
Yes, and each other. Yeah.
Indeed. I love this topic. This topic wasn't something that I intended to pull into a podcast, but yesterday I was writing policy for our organization for Inside Lumia, giving managers some guidelines on how to give feedback. And as I was writing the policy, I said, this is actually coaching. This is coaching skills at work, because empathy, listening, creating space, pacing is so central to the coaching conversation that the way that Lumia is interpreting feedback might be useful for everyone to use in all different kinds of relationships, because no matter what kind of relationship you have, you're going to have to give somebody feedback at some point. And we all know that that's a really uncomfortable thing.
Right.
How do you deal with feedback generally in your life? Do you give it freely? Do you receive it freely? How does it go for you?
Well, I was thinking about, for someone like me who's super active on social media, you start building little communities. And so I think empathetic feedback is really important. I think I'm bad at this in that I haven't donated enough time to listening to, digital communities, what they're saying. I do a lot of posting, but I don't do a lot of commenting, which I know is important.
How about in your personal life?
In my personal life, Vanessa and I are actually doing couples counseling, and I think it starts with this empathy. We talk a lot about how to fight without fighting. So if you're not empathetic and if you're not giving feedback that is based in empathy, then shields are up, people are defensive, there's ego. And so, this is with relationships, this is like ground zero.
Yeah. And I think it's important to qualify what kind of feedback requires a specific conversation, because we're not talking about little things day in and day out, like, hey, can you remember to get blueberries at the grocery store, or just like that shirt looks great on you. But we're talking about something that is a pattern or an incident or something that has happened that has caused noticeable harm, that if it continues, it will not be good for you, the other person, or whatever system you happen to be a part of.
Right. So there's a problem, there's something that isn't working for you. And instead of barking orders or telling someone what's wrong with them, going in through the door of empathy, as in, here's the feedback. Yeah.
Going in through the door of both empathy and process. And I think that's where coaching comes in. Is empathy is wonderful, but unless you have a framework or a process for that empathy to live inside, you're just sitting there in your own puddle of feelings. We need to move it. We need to move it forward.
So when you say move it forward and process, what exactly do you mean? You mean starting the conversation and then also executing, right? So there's change.
Yeah, giving expectations for the
Hmm.
conversation, setting the conversation appropriately, and then moving through it. And the reason that I sat down and wrote an actual policy on how to do this is because we grew up in a punitive society, all of
Hmm.
us.
Hmm.
And we've been socialized that there's a right way and there's a wrong way. No matter what it is, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And when there's a mistake or a misstep, most of us expect punishment, admonishment, poor feelings, fear, um, stonewalling, emotional stonewalling,
Hmm.
rejection, or to
Hmm.
possibly be ostracized or removed from whatever group we're a part of.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is, especially these days, really important in the workspace.
Yes.
Yeah, and it says here, according to a positive psychologist and author Todd Kashdan,
Cashton,
um,
yeah.
psychological safety is 50% of the recipe that is required for innovation, and then the other 50%, which is surprising, is a feeling of belonging. So these things have nothing
Yes.
to do with money.
Yeah. No, these things have
Yeah.
nothing to do with money. And, when we're thinking about the role of psychological safety and belonging as a required ingredient for innovation. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently is the way that our emotional experience truly overlaps at work and at home. That
Mhm.
if you don't feel psychologically safe at home, if you don't feel like you belong at home, if you don't have the tools to engage in society, you're going to be stifled in terms of what you're able to produce and contribute as a human. And then
Mhm.
work is just, another microcosm of our full lived experience. We don't spend our whole lives at work, but we do spend our whole lives looking for both psychological safety and belonging.
Yeah, I mean, I it's interesting, the belonging piece, because I feel like if you feel like you belong to a community, to anything, um, you actually, that belonging becomes this feeling of whatever you're doing is kind of greater than yourself.
Yes, and belonging is really nuanced. It includes everything from knowing that your thoughts and ideas are actually heard and considered.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
I want to be clear that I'm talking about work, but I'm also not talking about work. I had a client the other day whose dad is visiting,
mhm.
and my client got onto the call and was furious because he realized that when he speaks, his father does not hear him.
Yeah,
And that dynamic is so central to belonging.
sure.
And then we're also talking about having your contributions to any relationship respected, whether it's a friendship or a work relationship or a partnership or a marriage or whatever it is, that someone says I see you, and the who you are, the way that you show up is what makes our relationship a good thing to be a part of.
Yeah. In relationships, would you say, or could you say that, feeling desired falls under belonging as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And desire's complicated because from there, we're moving into the realm of human sexuality, and we could do a
Mhm.
whole other podcast on this,
Yeah.
the role of fantasy, your own turn on template, what it means to
Right.
you, your relationship with touch. But yes, and so each of these pieces kind of are their own little buckets for
Mhm.
exploration. Um, Another piece of this that might tie into the concept of desire is being able to be exactly who you are without fear of disapproval.
Yeah. I think that's crucial. I think especially in coaching, it's crucial, to give yourself permission to be who you are. I think
Mhm.
that's where you shine as a coach. If you don't, you could kind of turn invisible.
You could turn invisible. And then on the flip side, the reason that coaching is such a great example of how all of this works is what coaches do for their clients is give their clients permission to be exactly who they are in the
Right.
space of that coaching relationship without
And I
fear
think
of
that
disapproval.
this is why the giving advice is not productive, because you're um, not allowing the client to be who she is. You're kind of trying to mold or grab or control this person very subtly.
Yes. And what you just described, molding, grabbing, or controlling someone very subtly, whether it's a coaching relationship or any other kind of relationship, those are behaviors that are both maladaptive, harmful, and unproductive.
Hmm.
Yep.
The opposite of empathy.
The opposite of empathy. Yeah. So let's talk about, giving feedback, which is uncomfortable for everyone because of that punitive mindset that we've been
Hmm.
raised with. And I was scrolling on Instagram and I forget exactly who it was, but it was someone famous. And it was like, what advice do you wish you had given your younger self? Or what advice do you
Hmm.
wish your younger self had followed? And it really struck with me because the person said, I wish I had failed more often. I wish I had allowed myself to fail
Hmm.
more often. And that hit me like a train because we're so socialized to be terrified of failure, to be terrified of mistakes. But failure is such a normal aspect of life. And it's really where we learn the most. How
Right.
different would our experience of our existence be if we were all encouraged to go out there and fuck it up, see what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah.
How do you think that would have changed your childhood?
I think I would have took more risks. I think I would have stretched more. Um, I think when you fail, it's weird because the road forks, and a lot of people when they fail, they internalize, they get scared. The creative stove is suddenly hot; they don't want to touch it anymore. So that's one path. But the other path, with the mindset that you're talking about, leaning into failure, seeing it as data and information, um, it allows you to we talk about playing in your sandbox. It allows you to play and experiment so you can be better at whatever you're doing. And I don't know if you can be better without failure.
Absolutely. For me, my wish list for an evolved society is for folks to erase shame and look at failure with celebration of what a
Mhm.
glorious disaster that was. Let's sort through the rubble and see what we can learn.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine how many people would shine if they had the ability to embrace failure? I mean, easier said than done. I still struggle with it. I get scared all the time, but I force myself to just do what I feel is exciting and then see what happens. But yeah, I mean, most people I know, their growth, their potential's stunted because of the afraid to fail.
Yes, very much so. And that's not an accident. There's a lot of evolutionary psychology that is at play with our relationship with failure, with the pain set that comes with the idea of wrongness and shame and failure.
Hmm.
Um, and it's fascinating to me because at this point in time in 2022 we all have very functional neocortex logic centers, but our old evolutionary systems, the limbic and the reptilian brain, are still running the show. So
Hmm.
let me
Right.
break it down a little bit more to get pretty specific because it's important to understand. So when we evolved as a human, we didn't grow and swap out one brain for the next. We actually have three layers of brain that grew on top of each other.
Hmm.
And our reptilian brain is 500 million years old. And this is like black and white instincts. Like I'm in danger, I'm safe. I'm hungry, I'm full. And the reptilian brain moves real fast and going back and forth between those black and white drives. Yes, no, right, wrong, safe, danger, hungry,
Mhm.
full. There is no self awareness. There's no
Just survival.
control. It's automatic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's straight automatic. Um, and then the second part of the brain, the limbic system, it grew on top of the reptilian brain and it's a little bit more evolved, but it still runs on that same fast, automatic yes no system.
Mhm.
And the limbic brain is where our emotions are organized. So, for perspective, the way that our emotions are organized share the same level of consciousness as horses and apes and other large mammals. So, when we're living and reacting from this very automatic combination of black and white drives and emotion, we ourselves are no more evolved than a horse.
How do we, give our brains an update? You know how our iPhones, they automatically update when it needs to. I feel like our brains are in need of an update, a 2.0.
They are. They are. And as I was writing this, it really nailed me that what coaching does is gives us the framework for the brain update because
Mhm.
it gets us to slow down. In our reptilian brain and in our limbic brain, it just moves fast. It takes um, zero point 0.1 seconds, so like a hundredth of a second for our
Right.
brain to determine whether I'm okay or not, right? It just goes so fast. I like you, I don't like you. I'm safe, I'm not safe.
Mhm.
Boom, boom, boom. And we get stuck there. Um, the neocortex, that is the part of our brain that needs a little bit of an update. It's the newest part of the brain. It's rational. It's 100 million years old and it gives our species the gift of system two thinking. But because it's the newest part of our brain, it's really slow. It takes effort. It takes awareness. It takes a lot of work to be controlled. And it takes a lot of work to be reflective.
Mhm.
So, when we're talking about why coaching is important, why coaching is effective, and how it can be effective in giving feedback, understanding this setup of if we don't take the time to use a multi-step feedback system and slow this whole thing down, we're setting ourselves up for a psycho-emotional experience where we're completely incapable of using logic, ration, control, or being actually reflective.
So you're talking about actually, I know we're joking about updating our brain, but for real, updating our brain by the practice of coaching so you learn these tools, so you don't just react or you're not, set in survival mode.
Yes, that is literally what I'm saying, that coaching and really specifically the frameworks and pacing of a coaching
Mhm.
conversation, slowing things down, doing
Rewires
things
you,
in
updates you.
steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives us the capacity to essentially override our old biological systems and tap into our newer system that is better suited to modern life.
And, although our brains are really old, one of the miracles, I think, just of humans in general, is that, we can change, like secondary change. So whether we're talking about, physical body change or our brain, we can adapt, we can change, we could rewire, um, and that to me, that's the miracle. To me, that overrides, having parts that are 100 million years old.
Right. No, it is. It is remarkable, and that's the science of neuroplasticity,
Mhm.
and that's also the exact same science that coaching uses to rewire and extend what our consciousness is actually capable of, and what is the most fascinating to me about all of this is that we are talking about deep, complex, evolutionary neuroscience.
Hmm.
And it feels very vast, but the application of it is so freaking simple.
Yeah,
Like a 5-year-old could do it.
it's simple, but it takes tons of repetition, correct?
It does. It
Like you don't
does.
do it once and suddenly there's change. I mean, it's like, it's like sit-ups or or diet or, yeah, just I'm changing the pattern is just it needs so much repetition.
It does need repetition, and it's joyful repetition. I did a coaching demo for our students the other day, and I worked with somebody who volunteered for maybe about 4 minutes, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful demonstration, and there were some folks in the room who had just joined Lumia the day before, and they were their eyes were like saucers, and I said, folks, I've been coaching for 13 years. This is what 13 years experience looks like. I don't
Mhm.
expect you to be able to
Right.
pull this rabbit out of your hat tomorrow.
Yeah. How
So,
do you think let me ask you this. You've been pedaling the bike for 13 years, so obviously in that 13 years, your brain has changed.
yes,
And do you notice that?
yes,
Yeah.
I do. I can tell you, and so has yours, by the way, because we've been doing this together. So, what I notice about the two of us is that we don't really take a lot of things personally anymore.
That is true.
We're both super chill.
Yeah, we hold things more at a distance.
Yep. Even if there are problems, we're both super chill.
Yeah.
We communicate much more strongly. It seems like we both have better relationships. Um, and I notice for myself that pacing of slowing it down, of saying, okay, what's step one?
Mhm.
Okay, what's step two? And just that easy cadence is what my brain needs in order to limit that limbic fight or flight response and pull up into the neocortex for logic and strategy. I
Yeah.
don't think that I would have made it this far in business, 10 years plus as an entrepreneur without these skills.
Right. It is true, and, it's something I don't think about just because life happens and we rarely look down and see how far we've come, but for sure, I mean, our personalities, have not changed, but, yeah, how we work, what used to activate us maybe activates us less. That whole distancing you're talking about, absolutely. I think just as we get older, we get better at not being, knocked off the platform.
Yeah, the operating
Yeah,
system has
yeah,
updated.
yeah.
Welcome.
Good morning. Yes, I hope it
Yeah.
keeps updating. I feel like the updating bar on my operating system, my brain is 90%, but it's not quite done. I'm still waiting for it to, ping and say, "Okay, you are officially updated."
We'll
Maybe in
get
another
there.
2 years. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll get there, right? I mean, you have a 50th birthday coming up. Maybe that's going to
yes,
be when it goes
the
bing,
tipping point. Exactly.
right?
Right.
So I want to demonstrate how thank you for bearing with me through all of the complex science, because it's
Mhm.
important to understand the background, everything from the punitive society, down through the evolutionary triggers. But the feedback system to eliminate shame is actually really simple. There's 5 steps. Um, and again, this is policy that we use at Lumia. If other people out there are managers, you're welcome to adopt this. Just give me a shout for support. And then, I think that this is really effective to use in interpersonal relationships as well. Uh, Simply because you are providing that psychological safety, and the outcome is that you give everyone's brain a chance to chill out because of the pacing and actually get to a place where you can have a productive outcome.
Mm.
So, step one is you detected a mistake, or there's been an incident, or, and this is, I think, the most common area where people need feedback, or you're seeing a
Mhm.
pattern. So,
Right.
like, if you're watching a friend do the same stupid shit like every other week, you're seeing a pattern. If you're seeing a
Mhm.
pattern with your partner, if you're seeing a pattern with your kid, if you're seeing a pattern with your coworker, and it's in your interest and in that person's interest to say, "Hey, I'm seeing this pattern and it's hurting you."
Mhm.
So step one is to notice the pattern and drop down into empathy, and for yourself, think about, how is this person doing generally as a whole person? What has their life been like? Have there been major changes or stressors? Um, when you give them feedback, do you have a sense of how this person might react or respond? And taking the time to do that puts you into a compassionate mindset and limits your own limbic response, because giving feedback is stressful for both parties. It's stressful for the person giving the feedback, and it's stressful for the person receiving the feedback.
Yeah, it's what I hear you saying is basically knowing the person's story, what they've been through, where they were, and so instantly they become three-dimensional, and that's when you could be more empathetic instead of just judging someone based on their behavior.
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that when we're using this process, our goal is to help someone course correct,
Mhm.
not to be right. And when we use empathy, that's what we're basically trying to account for within ourselves, is the very human tendency to be like, I'm right and you're wrong.
Mhm.
So once you really get a chance to dig in and think about the person's story, step two is to run your own little empathy based assessment. So if you're observing somebody or there's been an incident, in an ideal world, what did you think was going to happen if the incident or mistake or pattern hadn't occurred? What's the ideal state? So you were expecting what from the person in front of you? And then, and get that down on paper. Like, really get that down on paper, because something that happens all the time is that we all walk around with expectations for how others are going to behave, but we don't share our expectations, and no one can read your mind.
Mhm.
Have you ever had that experience where you were like, man, I thought you were going to do this? And then that person had obviously no idea what you thought.
Yeah, all the time. All the
Really?
time. Yeah. Or I jump to conclusions a lot, or if, someone misses a meeting, I don't get a text, I assume, I may take it personally, or, something is happening that is not true.
Wow. Okay. And I go right to like, they're dead in a ditch somewhere.
Because you have a lot more empathy than I do.
Maybe. Well,
Yeah,
this all right, John. So let's get into this. So,
yeah.
what were you expecting to happen? Give
Mhm,
yourself the full rundown of what your expectations were, because you're going to need to share them. And then, what happened instead? And when we're sourcing and actually getting down on paper what happened instead, this is where we need to be really careful of that punitive socialization, because we need to stick to the facts. We need to be absolutely unemotional and give a factual rundown about our direct experience and observations. We can't project and say you did this and it caused the world to end. No, it's I observed this very
yeah.
specific thing. I heard you say this. I watched you do this. What did you directly experience?
Emotions distort, especially in, the coaching space.
They do. And we don't want
Mhm,
to label facts with emotions. Facts are
mhm,
facts, and facts are very useful just as they are. Um, And then the third piece is that we take the time to actually think about what kind of support this person might need given what we're observing. Does this person need to learn something new? Do they need help? Are they overwhelmed? Was the expectation reasonable to begin with? These are all things that you yourself want to take accountability for imagining before you go to somebody else with feedback so that you're sharing the burden.
Mhm.
And then step 3 is the hard part. This is where humans get tripped up because nobody likes conflict or confrontation. And so this is where you actually reach out to someone and say, hey, I have some feedback for you.
Mhm.
I'm not coming from, and this is very important, I'm not coming from the perspective of you being in trouble. I just really want to draw your awareness to something that I think is hurting you. And my goal is to help you. Do you have space to talk to me about this?
Yeah, it's coming from a place of, care, concern.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to make really explicit about everything that I just shared is that you're taking 3, 4 steps to address and reinforce your intentions and move the mindset and language away from anything that has to do with punitive, because this is our first opportunity to provide psychological safety so that
Mhm.
somebody doesn't revert into that reptilian brain where all they can do is black or white thinking.
Right. Most people grew up with, consequences, like you were saying, punitive. Most people did not grow up with this kind of psychological safety.
No, and
Yeah.
most people don't exist in relationships where there is this kind of
Yeah.
psychological safety,
Absolutely. Yeah.
unless you are literally surrounded by coaches who are well versed in restorative practices, you're probably not going to get this stuff. So it's important to take the time. And if you feel um, that you're not getting it across, really over communicate. I'm a big fan of putting things in writing just to give somebody space and a chance to process. And so you're not hitting them verbally with all of this stuff. Because when you hit
Mhm.
somebody verbally with stuff, you have no guarantee that your words are actually landing.
Mhm.
And so I like to give everything a little bit of space.
Yeah.
And then step 4 is to prepare ahead of time and to tell this person that you're going to give them a verbatim rundown of everything that you want to share with them in advance of a conversation. And this is a piece that might feel a little bit weird and clunky, but I can't stress enough how helpful it is.
Mhm.
Because where interpersonal relationships go off the rails is when people are stressed and they're surprised and they don't know what to expect. If your goal is actually to have an effective conversation, if you can give someone a template of exactly what to expect from you and then deliver and stick to your script of exactly what you said you were going to say, man, you are building trust like crazy.
Yeah.
You're not surprising someone. You're giving them a chance to actually process, to prepare themselves ahead of time, and you're increasing your chances that you can actually have an effective conversation.
Yeah, and for many, you're giving them a new experience, something they may not have experienced before, which is, safety.
Yeah. And so as you're moving into step 5 and you're preparing to give somebody the rundown, it's important to know how this human likes to receive information. Some people like things in writing. Some people are auditory processors. There's nothing wrong with sending someone a voice memo.
Oh, I do that all the time, by the way, via phone, via just because I'm always on the go. It really helps me to, yeah, put it in a voice memo.
Yeah. And what
Mhm.
I like about voice memos is that the other person gets to hear your humanity
Mhm. Right,
and to
instead of
hear
just the
your,
words.
yeah, to hear your voice and to have a human connection, with it. And then, if things are in writing, it gives people a chance to sketch all over it, to take notes, to ask
Mhm.
questions. Um, and then the final step is actually having the conversation. And actually having the conversation is probably where both parties will experience the most stress going in, But if you've taken the time to really stretch this thing out, empathize, create space, prepare, stick to the script, and you'll avoid a train crash.
Mm.
Something that's important to acknowledge is that if this is a very tender situation, you might not reach a resolution while you're having the conversation. It might just be that you're ripping the Band-Aid off of, face-to-face acknowledgement that something needs to, change. And
Yeah.
that's a big deal. That's a win in and of itself. Getting through that situation in a healthy way. Hallelujah. What do you make of all of this?
I think it's great. I love that we have a step-by-step process. And as you're going through this, I'm also thinking that this works not only in the workspace, not only in the coaching space with clients, but also with your relationships, friendships, with family members. It's kind of it's a wide net that we're throwing.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And, as you're running your script during the conversation, the person who's receiving the feedback may be all over the place. And that's okay.
Mm.
That person may be giving you excuses. They might be, physically jumpy. Like, let them have their experience. And your job is just to show up and do exactly what you said you were going to do, is stick to your own script, and then set a follow-up check-in to debrief. How's everybody doing?
I love it. I think the world would be a better place if we all practice more of this, kind of across the board.
Well, thankfully, we have a coaching company.
Yeah.
And this is what we do. Is train thousands of people how to do this and shout it from our podcasts. So
Yeah.
I am grateful that we get to do this work.
Yeah. And if you're interested in diving deeper, if you're interested in helping other people and you're curious about all this stuff, meet us at Lumia.
Indeed. All right, friend. Be well.
Be well. Thank you for being empathetic with me all these years. All right. Be well. Have a great day.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Everything Life Coaching. If you're feeling the draw to become a coach, head to lumiacoaching.com/everything. Explore a new career that brings fulfillment, gives you a true sense of purpose, and a bold community to do it with.
Lumia is ready to equip you with the tools, training, and community you will need to reach your goals. If you're ready to build a unique coaching business on your own terms while making an impact on the world at large, Lumia is the next bold step in your coaching journey. That's lumiacoaching.com/everything.
And hey, if you're waiting for a sign, this is it.